Bienvenidos,
Hey.
DC. Welcome back to another episode of DC TBD. My name is Ian Taranji. I am one of your co-hosts. We are joined by
Right here.
the venerable Marcus K. Dowling.
Thank you. Yes, we are here another week of
Nice.
DC TBD. I'm
DC
excited to be here.
Very good, very good. I'm excited to be here as well. We are unfortunately not going to be joined this evening by our third co-host, Michelle Bush.
She'll be back in the building next week.
She'll be back. She'll be back in the chair next week. I'm fairly confident
Right.
that my boo is going to be back.
Hell yeah. There it is.
But
Girl, you should
she's
know
she's had
that.
some issues. She actually suffered an attack.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to speak too much about it, except just to offer Michelle our love, all of our healing vibes,
Absolutely.
everybody here at One Love Massive, our whole crew. Marcus, I certainly don't want to speak for you, but
no, I love Michelle to pieces. You know this. I don't.
Yes, sir.
I don't
Yes, sir.
tell lies, and
I know you don't. And
That's the homie. I love her
and
to
it's the
pieces.
truth. It's the truth. We know she's going to be back here next week, and when and if she's ready to discuss all of the happenings, she will. And if she's not, she won't. And that's going to be
Keep it moving.
entirely up to her, and we're going to keep it moving. So we've got I really wish it was going to be a super lighthearted show tonight.
It's gonna be heavy as hell.
It's going to be heavy as hell, so I think we are going to try to lighten things up a little bit towards the end. We're going to talk about rising Democratic Socialist superstar Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yes.
And also, we're going to get away from some politics, and we're going to discuss some music. Kamasi Washington, the great jazz saxophonist,
Some cool jazz.
or as they would say in England, saxophonist,
Saxophonist.
which I don't approve of in any way, shape, or form. Kamasi is a brilliant jazz saxophonist, and so he just dropped a pretty dense double album. I've already spoken about it at length on Chunky Glasses, the podcast.
Yes.
Shout out to my man Kevin Hill, as
Shout out to
always.
Kev.
And so a lot of my thoughts are already out there, although I haven't had a chance to dig in because I've been basically listening to it nonstop, even since I recorded that pod. So, and Marcus has yet to unveil.
I've literally said nothing about the album.
He has yet to unveil any thoughts about what Kevin Hill modestly describes as perhaps the greatest work of art in the 21st century.
Yeah, I'll get into it. I've been
We're
listening
gonna
to this
talk about
album for like 3 weeks now. I mean,
Yeah.
it's been out for a week. I've been listening to it for 3.
Right,
It's
right.
astounding.
Same.
Yeah, so let's get into the conversation.
Yeah, let's get
This
into
is a heady show.
Let's get into less fun stuff. Let's talk about the Supreme Court. That thing. Yeah, people forget Article 3 of the United States Constitution. After Article 1 describes our legislature, our bicameral legislative system of a
Yes.
House and Senate. Article 2 describes all the powers of the president and the presidency, and the entire executive architecture. And Article 3 discusses the federal courts, the Supreme Court being really the only court that is specifically mentioned in the Constitution. We had a number of cases this week, and if you're of a progressive mindset, none of these went your way.
No.
Not a single one of these went your way.
Almost comically, like it's
almost comically, almost like they intended it that way.
no, really, like so if you can break it down for people, because
Yeah.
I have some thoughts, but if you could just break this down, it's fascinating.
Right. And before we break it down, I'd also like to say, kind of going back to an old bit.
Yeah.
We are in no way, shape, or form sponsored by Budweiser or the Anheuser-Busch Company. I am, however, enjoying the hell out of this Budweiser.
At least
and
it's not the
so
America beer. They're
if-
back to calling it Budweiser again.
If Anheuser-Busch wishes to sponsor, you can reach out to Marcus at One Love.
Yeah.
That's
Marcus at
.com.
onelovemassive.com.
Because we know that Marcus Donovan does not have that email address. That is yours.
Yes.
Do not send your hate mail for Marcus Donovan to Marcus K. Dowling, which it
No.
would be Marcus at onelovemassive.com.
Exactly.
Let's talk about a couple of these Supreme Court opinions.
But
So,
of course.
in NIFLA v. Becerra, Becerra being the Attorney General of California, NIFLA being some pro-life organization.
Right.
Basically, the Supreme Court blocked a California law requiring nonprofits who are advising people in like crisis pregnancy. California law was requiring these nonprofits, even though they were religious and pro-life and bent, to inform pregnant patients that there's free and low-cost abortion services available to them. So the court struck down that law.
Okay, so the Supreme Court is removing your ability to advise someone about even the idea of having an abortion.
This is correct. This is correct.
I just want to qualify these things.
No. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's clarify. Let's talk about exactly what these things do.
Because a lot of people won't get it, but the Supreme Court is basically like, okay, do you want to have an abortion? Well, nobody's going to tell you how to safely go about doing this.
Yeah. What this is basically, I mean, just to unpack the California law, there are these crisis pregnancy centers, which are usually like church affiliated, church run. They're very pro-life, and listen, that's fine. This is America. You get to believe how you want to believe and try to persuade your fellow Americans. But basically, so you have a teenager who gets pregnant, and then who is she going to talk to? There's any number of people you might talk to: somebody at school, a parent, a brother, a cousin, maybe a priest. I think for a lot of these people who go to their priests and say, Father, I'm 15, but I just realized I'm pregnant. I've been having sex with my boyfriend. I don't know what to do. My parents are going to flip, blah, blah, blah. You know how 15 and 16-year-olds are. And so the priest says, here, you should go to this place. This is, they'll better advise you than I could. Being likely someone who has, we won't get into priests. That's neither here nor there. That's neither here nor there.
So the other opinion that was offered this week.
Right. So basically, California law said that they had to advise about abortion options. The Supreme Court struck that down.
Right.
Other cases this week requiring public sector union members to pay union fees violates the First Amendment.
Right.
There's an issue. I mean, obviously, you're not forced to join a union, but that makes you what's called a free rider, which is someone who doesn't have to pay the union dues and be a member of the union, but you're getting the benefit of the collectively bargained pay and benefits and vacation time and all the things.
Right.
That was Janice v. Asks Me, AFSCME.
Right.
Is that the Service Workers Union? Or
yes, it is.
Yeah, okay.
So ultimately they're saying that...
They're basically saying... They basically kind of put a nail in the coffin of public sector unions in much the way that they've done to private sector unions. I mean, that's, to me...
Right. So if you work...
To me, that's a whole other show. That's a whole other like deep dive topic, which we should definitely get into the whole concept of collective bargaining and unions in this country. Like, we should definitely talk about that.
So if you work in a blue collar, especially in a blue collar employment situation, and you don't have anybody to advocate for you, you will continue ad infinitum to not have people willing to advocate for your basic human rights.
That's correct. That's correct. I mean, look, like I say, we really should at some point do a deep dive and talk about a lot of these.
Right, but I just wanted to make sure that people got like the.
I agree, but I'm only saying that. I'm only saying that because I have a million things that I would I would like to say.
As would I. But
we'll never get to the rest of this stuff here. So
right.
Other cases, the Muslim travel ban, was found by the Supreme Court to be well within the president's authority under immigration law, and particularly with the national security concerns. Number of Muslims from these countries who've traveled to the United States on visa and killed Americans is, drum roll please,
Jesus.
Zero.
So if you're a Muslim, you are effectively banned from immigrating and or flying into the United States.
It's not. It has the Muslim ban was rewritten and softened out of necessity, not out of some Grinch-like melting of Trump's heart or anything like that.
No.
It's been out of necessity because courts have struck it down, and so they've continuously tried to rewrite it in such a way.
But they got it right now.
So they got it right now as far as the Supreme Court is saying, but it is not a blanket Muslim ban. It is not. If you're Muslim and you live in Paris, you cannot emigrate. You cannot emigrate
But still, there is the notion that there is somebody in a flyover state, possibly. Not castigating everybody who lives in flyover states. I have many good friends in Iowa.
Ohio, Michigan, Illinois for me.
Exactly. But if they happen to see this Parisian person, who happens to be Muslim, walking down the street, there is a possible chance that this person will be unnecessarily ostracized.
There's a chance, certainly.
I'm just
certainly is a chance
because the Supreme Court has opened up the legality of that as perfectly permissible behavior.
So
in this country,
I just want to say this entire discussion of these Supreme Court cases is preface for when we talk about the real nuke. We're building up to this
because I want to make sure that everybody understands
because this is the best it's going to be for a long time.
I want to build up to it because this is the thing. Like it's like okay, so there's like when Obama was in office, the Supreme Court was kind of an open door. He had a lot of freedoms that were extended. Things were progressing in a manner that we were becoming a more inclusive nation in a lot of ways.
The court, we were I would say. Not really,
but okay. So on paper,
actions of the court, with the exception of gay rights, the court finally vindicated gay rights to marry, same-sex marriage.
But the case I'm building is that there's a door that's slamming.
On
American freedom.
Yes.
And this door started Sunday. This is the level that the Trump administration moves at now. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make this point really fast.
No.
The Trump administration moves at lightning speed now because for 500 days, their mandate sailed through the country.
Yeah.
Unfettered. The women marched. Didn't matter. The children marched. Didn't matter. The blacks marched. Didn't matter. The Latinos marched. Didn't matter.
We got a big march coming up on Saturday. You're not really hyping everybody up.
No, but I'm saying this only because it's going to take the women, the blacks, the Latinos, and the children together.
Yeah.
To do a thing. But Latinos have to, this march we'll talk about the 30th, and we'll get to that, has to exist. The Women's March had to exist. Like all of these initial movements, all the children coming to the National Mall had to exist.
Right.
So that they know how to do it. So that they can do it again and again and again.
Yes.
That's the whole thing. I mean, I'm not saying anything that's crazy.
We have DC protest experts.
Right.
So let me just highlight a couple of other.
Run
a couple
through
of other. Just two more, and I can.
None of this stuff existed past none of this stuff existed before Sunday, right?
Yeah, roughly. Well, a couple. These two cases actually one was from I think last week, and the other was from.
But these are in the past
2 weeks ago. But this is very recent.
The Trump administration moves in lightning pace right now,
and this is about redistricting and gerrymandering. There's two cases on the major redistricting case, and just to kind of go back. I mean, obviously, every 10 years we have a census that's called for in the Constitution itself. And then the states get census data, and that determines, how many congressional seats they're going to have, and that usually determines how many state legislative seats there are in the state legislature, and then whoever is the party that happens to be in power at the time gets to sort of draw the map. And in 2010, we saw there was a huge sort of backlash to Obama's election, and it was a huge wave election for Republicans all up and down the ticket. At the national level, they took back the House. They came very close to taking back the Senate and would eventually take it back in 2014. And the Democrats really started a roll beginning in 2010 of just losing state house after state house after state house after state house, even in a lot of blue states, places like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, sort of like Obama country in that industrial Midwest. So redistricting is a really huge issue, and this is another topic, man. We could just dig into.
So-
It's actually
So
a topic of
yeah.
interest of mine. But basically, what the court found was it punted on the big redistricting case. And just so people know, Kennedy was kind of like the swing vote that they were trying to get in this big redistricting case. And then the court functionally approved a racial gerrymander in Texas,
Right.
where the court sort of conceded, and by the conceded that there were racial aspects to the gerrymander, but still found that it was okay. It's another further erosion of the Voting Rights Act, even the 14th Amendment.
Well, even I mean the thing with the
That was
voting
Abbott
rights,
v. Perez, by the way.
what's fascinating with all of this is that we elected a black president in back-to-back elections.
Yeah, we did.
92% and 96%, 96% and 92% of all black voters voted for Barack Obama in
Right.
both of those elections. And if there's any one thing that
White people learn
white
from that.
people don't want to see, and I'm not saying all white people. I'm saying that white people of a
Enough.
certain conservative persuasion
Enough of them.
are not wanting to see ever again. It's 96% of black people unifying behind a black man as president. This is just too much black happening in the same place at the same time. So if you can effectively put people in corners and literally draw circles around them and highlight them and shove them all into the same box, black votes are less effective that way.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at population shifts and population demographic shifts across the country,
Right.
gentrification is real.
Yeah.
It's not just happening in D.C. It's happening in every major city in America.
Right.
So if you effectively take these people that are already being displaced and you put them in a little circular spot on a map, and that's where all their votes are, when you look at the electoral college overall, you're able to then take those clusters
Mm-hmm.
and I guess it would be
Kind of diminish
diminish their potential impact
Right. That's
on
exactly
the overall vote.
right. I mean, that's the whole. I'm by no means schooled enough in these topics to talk that knowledgeably about it, but it's what's called packing and cracking. You either pack minorities into a small number of districts, or you crack them up and separate them out into a large number of
Right.
of districts where they have less impact. And either way, their
But
impact is lessened. Their impact is lessened either because they don't have a real say in determining who their representative is. If they're cracked into many diffuse districts, or if they're packed into districts, then you have a state like Alabama, which is like 40% African American, but maybe like 15% of their congressional
Right.
delegation are black Democrats.
I will say this, and we'll get to this when we talk about the New York City case with Castro, with
Cortez.
Cortez.
Ocasio-Cortez.
That's right. You made the same mistake earlier.
did.
So
I did make the
Cortez,
same-
right? So we talk about Cortez. We talk about New York City later. We're going to talk about the fact that minority influence. You're not going to see cracking ever again, because
You're not gonna be
people
able to-
understand that minority influence over liberal white voters
Yeah,
is totally a thing.
it is.
It's not a thing that existed before the election of Barack Obama. The
Yeah.
election of Barack Obama taught us anything. It's that people listen to their black friends, explicitly on almost any topic.
I remember in 2007 having to convince black friends that Obama could be elected.
But now we're at a completely different
Yeah.
place. We've had 2 terms of it, so you're going to see a lot more packing and a lot less cracking.
Yeah.
So this is a perfect example of where we're going with this whole packing of minorities into smaller.
And that's what really
districts.
sucked. And that's what really sucked about the redistricting case that the court punted on, because I'm just real quick on history. Like Kennedy was actually on the last partisan redistricting case that made it to the Supreme Court. He held that the plan wasn't constitutionally sufficient, but he kind of left the door open. Hey, I would be open to a
Right.
plan, some type of a scheme that you can impose to make this a more fair process. And he basically punted on this case in what he had to know was one of the last cases of his career.
Right.
He basically said, well, they don't have standing. You can't, if you're in a district that you're claiming is fucked up because of gerrymandering, well, then that's a problem with your district. It's not a problem with the whole state. Forgetting that each of these districts, is part of the state map,
and then
which
you
is
can boot them out. You can boot the troublesome, population that is keeping, certain types of people from getting elected out of your district. That's one of the crazy things about.
You pack them in Milwaukee.
Yeah,
is what you do. So, and all of this is preface, as we hinted, as we allured to earlier. Alluded to, not allured. Alluded to earlier.
This is the least alluring thing.
This is the least. I have to say, in my defense, I am a total Supreme Court nerd, a constitutional law nerd. Like
I was going to say, right.
I could geek out on a lot of this stuff. A lot of these redistricting cases, I'm going to read the opinion, but I'm probably going to go back and read the briefs, actually, from the parties on the redistricting case, just because I want to understand. I want to understand the redistricting process better and sort of like what are the arguments for making it better. But this is all preface to the H-bomb, or the K-bomb, if you will.
There it is.
That was dropped yesterday being Wednesday, when Justice Anthony Kennedy announced that he was retiring from the bench. He was appointed about 30 years ago by Ronald Reagan, after Reagan had appointed Robert Bork to the bench. And when people actually read what Robert Bork had written, they realized he was a crazy man who should in no way, shape, or form spend the rest of his life having any kind of influence over American jurisprudence.
I remember that. It's like, really?
And
did that? Okay.
And when Reagan realized he had to go back to the drawing board, he came up with a very kind of moderate conservative in Anthony Kennedy,
who's grown more liberal in his time on the bench, right?
He has grown more liberal in his time on the bench and has been functionally the swing vote on what has been a very evenly and bitterly divided Supreme Court. You have a liberal wing right now as it stands as of yesterday morning of Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor, Stephen Breyer, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Notorious
RBG. And then on the sort of the right side of jurisprudence, you have Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, the Chief Justice John Roberts, and then the recently confirmed and Trump appointed Neil Gorsuch. So. Kennedy, I just want to talk real quickly about what his legacy on the court has been, because he has been the swing vote on a very deeply divided court. Every time you hear about there's a 5-4 decision, it's usually a 5-4 decision in which Kennedy is in the 5, and he's usually in the 5 because you've got 4 and you've got 4, and then he is the one who has been a decisive vote.
They said he was on the right side of history for 30 years.
That's deeply debatable.
No, I understand. It was just the way that it was framed. I was like, so I mean, you just looked at his votes.
But that said, the man has, I think, a very lasting and profound legacy on the court. He's an icon of LGBTQ rights.
Yes,
he is an icon. He wrote the Windsor decision, which legalized same-sex marriage, and had actually written many of the gay rights decisions that preceded it, that sort of laid the jurisprudential foundation for the Windsor case.
Right.
He was he was the deciding vote that reversed Texas's law against sodomy.
Right.
And for whatever reason, I'm blanking on the name of that case, but but Kennedy wrote all of those opinions. He's a gay rights icon. He kept the court, I think, from going too far to the right on abortion. In the Casey, Planned Parenthood of Pennsylvania v. Casey case, which is from, I want to say like 92, 93. Justice O'Connor was also a conservative who was on the we're not ready to do away with Roe v. Wade just yet side of that case. On affirmative action, he's been a decisive vote in affirmative action cases. Again, there was the University of Texas case that he was a deciding vote. With Kennedy gone, John Roberts kind of becomes our swing vote right now. I can tell you this: Roberts vehemently opposes affirmative action.
Yes.
I don't know where he is on LGBTQ rights. He was in the minority on Windsor, and had kind of a, I really studied that Windsor opinion, and the most disappointing aspect of it is the dissents. The dissent by Scalia, the dissent by Roberts, sort of like, if we allow this to happen, what will possibly happen to our society if we're, doing away with duly enacted laws of our legislature? It's just like, it was
all
a
like
joke. It's
that
a joke.
whole thing, and it's my.
So Roberts isn't going to help the LGBTQ community from the bench. He's as a swing vote. It's
my concern about the court moving forward, and it's something to think about.
An already conservative court, like the cases that we talked about in the first segment, just within the last 2 weeks.
So it's the use of the Holy Bible as the best course of, like the best course of action, in the place of law. So in the case of like legalizing gay marriage, or like keeping affirmative action as a part of like African American civil rights.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that if you're a strict constructionalist of the Bible-created Constitution, and you thump that thing so hard every day of your life.
The biblical Constitution, I think that's how we should refer to it.
Yeah, of the United States of America.
The biblical Constitution, for people who want to believe in sort of like, we have to find out what these slaveholders felt and what they would have thought about high-capacity magazines and the Second Amendment.
Of course. It's like, this is
slaveholder, he probably would have wanted more guns.
Right. This is problematic. Like, this is extraordinarily problematic, because the thing that we've done now is that we've gone past the point of no return with conservative America. This is why Donald Trump was elected president.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what you're ultimately
definitely feels like that.
What you're ultimately doing with Kennedy leaving, whomever is appointed by Donald Trump is going to be like a step worse than Gorsuch.
Yeah.
Like, he's going to be further to the right than this guy was. This guy is pretty far to the right. And with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court being in the conservative bloc.
Yep. Solidly in the conservative bloc.
Completely. People have to understand, he's completely in the conservative bloc.
He's the one persuadable conservative, and he votes with the conservatives probably 90% of the time. No joke.
This now gives Donald Trump a rubber stamp. This gives him a bulldozer. It's not even a rubber stamp. It's a bulldozer. That's what it is. Because it's a bulldozer. Because this is the way Trump operates. To bulldoze abortion rights, affirmative action, to attempt to bulldoze gay marriage. Attempt. That's the one I think that won't necessarily pass, because he understands. If Donald Trump understands anything, it's money.
Mm-hmm.
And there's enough of a conservative gay lobby in America that's making 6 to 7 figures right now that could stand up and look at Donald Trump in the face if he wants to, obliterate gay marriage. And he'll back down. That same thing does not exist in the black community.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Like, no, it doesn't, because
Herman Cain ain't getting it done.
Right. And it's just, and Oprah's not going to shake Trump's hand and play nice on this conversation.
I feel like I can feel the ghost of Kanye West floating above this conversation.
We could save all talk of Kanye. Like, Kanye with that court is a oh God, because Kanye with that court can do all sorts of crazy stuff, like just have a party. But
okay, all right.
But
we won't talk Kanye.
Right, we won't. Actually, we don't have to talk Kanye, because we could talk about the fact that Donald Trump is going to bulldoze pieces of American legislation that has been on the books for the last 50 years and has effectively led to a space in America where we are right now.
You mean like civil rights legislation?
That's exactly where I was going. So if you're a white person and you live next to a black person who couldn't afford to live next to you for the better part of 50 years, and now they do. If that person did buy their house and they're a renter living next to you, there's a pretty good chance that they're not going to be in the house in like 3 to 5 years. And there's a chance that if your child goes to school with a black person and you go to you send your kids to a private school, you don't send them to public school, and you've got like 3 black kids in that class with your son or daughter, they're not going to be in a school.
Yeah.
They're not going to. They're just not. Because
and the government might help you pay for it.
Right, exactly. And that's frightening. And there's no amount of protesting, especially for civil rights, especially in the African American civil rights
Right.
conversation,
Mm-hmm.
because we've effectively figured out that Latinos can work in lower to middle income jobs and support a white dominated power structure in large scale, like, retail based industry,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I know where you come from with this, and I know how you feel about this,
Yeah.
but it's honestly
No,
where
but-
we are, and it's fucking sad.
It's real. It's real. It's
That's
totally
the thing. If you're black, though, that same level of placement within this hierarchical structure, because it's an oligarchy. That's what we're dealing with now. It's not a democracy. It's not, any sort of like wingnut socialism that the wingnuts on the far left are trying to misconstrue this as.
Real. Right.
It's an oligarchy. It's a
No doubt.
it's a 17th century English oligarchy. That's what we're dealing with. And
I would say more like early 20th century robber baron type activity.
but that was they at least had faith in democracy. This guy has no faith in democracy.
I mean, once Teddy Roosevelt showed up, I think they lost their faith
Right.
in democracy.
Right, but
And
this,
then when Franklin Roosevelt showed up, they sure as shit lost their faith in democracy
Right,
until World War II happened, and suddenly we all had to pull together.
yeah, but I think that that's a great analysis, by the way.
Thank
But
you.
But I feel
I
like
was a U.S. history major.
no, I know, I appreciate it, because people don't understand that. But I feel like there's a real issue if you're a black person in America. I say this to all of my black friends, and I'll say it to all of them. I say it to everyone. If you're a black person,
You have a platform.
yeah, if you're a black person in America right now, don't act foolish for like the next 20 years, like, because you have no rights. Even if Kanye wins, because we'll go there for like half a second. Even if Kanye wins, you still functionally have no rights because Kanye has rights.
Yeah.
This is that thing that Chris Rock talks about when he does his
Jay-Z's going to
stand-up.
have rights.
Right.
Dave Chappelle's going to have rights.
Right. No, but there's that thing when Chris Rock does a stand-up where he talks about how OJ got free. That doesn't mean that every black person is OJ. It's not the case.
Yeah. The
Just
statistics don't
for
bear that
20
out.
years, just toe the line. Don't offend anybody. Don't anger anybody. Don't piss anybody off. Don't have any, rash displays in public of any sort of like unnecessary anger. Like possibly carrying a gun or wearing a T-shirt with a fist on it, or like.
Leave that to your white liberal friends.
Exactly, because there are white people who will happily now pick up telephones and call the cops on you. Because white people publicly police black people. That's what we
Lord,
do.
good Lord. In San Francisco, this woman was CEO of a cannabis company.
Yes. That's where we are. I mean, literally. Like
I know that they say when you deal, you don't indulge in your own supply. This woman needed to indulge in a little bit of her supply.
But I'm just saying, that's the thing that happens now.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court,
The Supreme Court is going to
legitimizes it now.
They're going to invest. I mean, let's talk about it. Roe versus Wade is in very serious danger of being overturned.
Roe versus Wade is done. It's the first thing that block, because it's a block.
That's the thing
what
that they
they'll
care
do.
about most.
And it's the easiest win.
Yeah, in many ways it is.
Win.
In many ways it is.
So
And
explain to people the nature of the opinion in Roe v. Wade, because I think that's one of those pieces of American history that doesn't get discussed enough, and it's going to get discussed. So like
Yeah, it's definitely
everybody
gonna get-
paying attention to this, like
it's definitely going to get discussed.
this is a thing that's going to be
So,
discussed a lot.
Yeah, when people say stuff like, and I'm trying to be even-handed here, but so I'll get into my actual view on the future of Roe versus Wade, because I keep hearing people saying, well, it's in very serious danger. It's in very serious danger. Look, Roe versus Wade is probably going to be overturned. And the reason for that is you have a fairly nonpartisan kind of consensus in the sort of legal scholarship community that Roe versus Wade, the actual opinion itself, was not well reasoned and is not sound constitutionally. So you have even people who agree that abortion should be legal, people who agree with the ultimate outcome of Roe versus Wade, more liberal legal scholars, will actually go out and say, yeah, but it is a poorly reasoned opinion.
Right.
I actually, while I don't consider myself to be an eminent legal scholar by any stretch of the imagination,
the way they're going to write that opinion to rescind it is going to be...
Oh, it's going to be bad.
It's going to be like, close your legs, ladies. It's
yeah.
1749. We will paint a scarlet letter.
Why are we laughing about this?
We will paint a scarlet letter on your Facebook profile.
Yeah.
If you dare to go and abort your child.
Oh my gosh. I'm trying to because I'm totally flaking out on who it was that actually wrote the opinion. I feel it was like Justice Berger.
Oh God,
Blackman.
Okay, I was like
Blackman
Berger. I was like Berger. Definitely, that doesn't make sense, right?
Berger concurred, but
okay, right.
according to Wikipedia. So I feel like Roe versus Wade is in very serious danger. Affirmative action. We just talked about the center, sort of the ideological center of the court now is John Roberts.
Yes,
and John Roberts is
very much to the right.
Has expressed a lot of antipathy for just the concept of affirmative action, much less the many various and sundry ways in which it's put into practice.
Black folk, just be cool for like 20 years. like
I mean, look, we're going to see continued erosion of voting
sudden
rights.
Moves.
Basically, we're going to see increasing tolerance for intolerance. Gay intolerance, racial intolerance, gender intolerance. Whether it's going to be religion, whether it's going to be the safety of our children, whether it's going to be national security, whether it's just going to be flat out white supremacy, racism, whatever it is, the Supreme Court is going to rubber stamp all of that shit. And any efforts, and more to the point, any efforts to combat, legislative efforts to combat, are going to face uphill battles in the court. I mean, we're going to see. We already have states that have enacted laws that say it's unlawful to discriminate against someone on the basis of sexual orientation or gender.
Yeah.
And so we're going to see challenges to those laws that the Supreme Court might well decide. Hey,
I'm going to say something crazy because I do this on occasion on this podcast.
Yes, you do. But go ahead.
If you're a gay black man who's the child of a single black woman, you're like literally like in like the lowest 1% of America right now.
That's deep.
And that's a real thing to consider. It's like
love to our gay black brothers.
Right. It's going to be
our
a
gay
hard
black
road.
Sisters.
It's going to be a hard road.
All those in between brother and sister.
It's going to be a hard road, like for real. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, look.
This is crazy town. Like this is a whole other level.
I was telling you before we got on the air. I remember election night, and I was just getting so disgusted. I think I literally turned off the TV at 10 o'clock before they called it for Trump, and just went to sleep. So I didn't even know what happened until I woke up the next morning, and then as soon as I looked at my phone, it was readily apparent that the worst case scenario had in fact come to pass.
Which you can do now, by the way.
Excuse me. And literally my first thought in my head was the Supreme Court is gone for a generation. Like we're gonna have Democratic presidents. We're gonna have liberal, maybe even socialist presidents with Congresses that want to do progressive things. Right. They're going to do progressive things that are going to be landmark pieces of legislation. The Supreme Court's going to shit on them. Yeah. For the next 40 years.
Oh,
the
totally.
Next 30 to 40 years.
Like, okay, so
if Trump gets reelected, we're going to see 7-2 majorities.
No, I mean, okay, so here's the thing. The thing about, and this is a fascinating thing that I never talk about, but we get to talk about it. If a person is not Donald...
Here on DC TBD.
Yeah, if a person that isn't Donald Trump wins the presidency in 2020, the Supreme Court ultimately runs the country. If that person, who will remain nameless, runs for president in 2020, the Supreme Court is actually doing the legwork.
The Supreme Court has already picked a president.
Right. They're doing the legwork. Like... that's the craziness of all of this.
Like that's a generation ago.
Right. Like, okay, so we built up to like gay marriage. We built up to all this stuff. Like, you know, in 40 years, we built up to it. You know, Stonewall to, it's 50 years. Stonewall to, you know,
Windsor.
like Windsor is like 50 years. So it took 50 years to build up to that, and we had to like go through like a conservative court to get there. Yeah. We had to like live through a cycle of a court to get to the point where we were at a space where you could, you know, like overturn, you know, like gay marriage and give gays the right to be married. Right. That's a thing.
Right.
Now we're at a place where all that's going to get repealed.
It might. I mean, look, I don't think gay marriage is going to get repealed.
No, gay marriage is the one.
What I think is going to happen is that
civil rights.
It's going to be a steady erosion, a steady chip away.
Right.
One case is going to validate this law that is terrible for minorities. One state is going to have a law that they're trying to help minorities gain voting rights or gain access to the courts and that's going to be struck down.
Right.
Like it's going to be just a steady but real erosion of the civil rights progress that we've made through the Supreme Court.
Here's what's crazy about this. It works on an even deeper level. Because I think about this stuff like all the time, and I think about it with like depth and scope. Because it's not enough for me. Okay, so when I read a news story, I just don't read the words that are on the page. It's like the news story is like, oh, in the news today, you know, like it was 85 degrees and, you know, the dog died. Well, I'm like, okay, well, what happens if the dog dies? Like, where are we going? Like, is there a cat that's going to be replacing the dog? Like, what's the story? So I look deeper into all of this, and I go, okay. So the first thing that we told everybody is when Donald Trump is president, we must protect states' rights. So if you vote in your home state legislature and, you know, like these laws go through states, and then there's some, you know, manner of jurisprudence where they want to take these cases, they want to turn these laws into, you know, cases against them.
Right. Usually because they're challenging the laws.
Right. The highest court in the land that these cases go to, if you have enough money, if your money is long enough to drag out a case to where it gets to the Supreme Court, this is the court you're dealing with. So ultimately, this means even deeper that if you're going to be a states' rights fanatic and you're going to try to elect all of these like radical, super, extra, ultra, anti-Trump, dump Trump liberals into office, they have even a longer, harder road to hoe.
Yeah.
Because in all of these states where these things would happen, there's some crazy rich guy on a hill who's very conservative, typically with a, you know, like an artillery of guns.
Yeah. Who
will happily fund some lawyer to run down and chase down these laws and beat them into the ground so that they don't exist.
It's the damnedest thing about rich people. They keep trying to get rich.
Right. It's just a thing to think about. Like, it's crazy, but it's absolutely true.
So we're going to jump around a little bit on topics.
Yeah. No
doubt. We've talked a lot about the crisis of separating children and parents at the border, and so we're not going to. We also talked about it for those who maybe we're too hungover most of Saturday and we're watching One Love massive content late into the night on Sunday.
That's the thing you can do.
You may have seen us. You may have seen Marcus and me on the DC as Fuck show.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun
with Marcus Bradley and Crushing Boo.
Yeah,
those guys are awesome.
Yeah,
much love.
You see what happens. This is like when all of the crazy thoughts that I say on this show kind of emanate from that hour of the night.
So we talked about the immigration crisis on at least the previous two DC TBDs. Also,
there needs to be a quick update because there are updates this week.
Well,
since we had the conversation on Sunday, I know that there's been movement.
There's been some movement. There's still, according to an article that I read today, there's still over 2,000 children who are in HHS custody, separated from families at the border.
Because aren't they still separating people from families at the border?
They're not actively doing it anymore, but they haven't yet
reunited.
It's a threat. They haven't yet reunited these children, these 2,047 children in HHS custody who've been separated from their families and are often in different states.
Yeah,
which is
because they already transported them.
Insane. They're still there, and as best as I can tell, I don't see any kind of plan.
And they're not going to put them on.
I don't see that it's a priority.
plane.
I don't see that it's a priority for the administration to get these children reunited with their parents. And so, that's still going on. I wanted to bring a little bit of attention to the fact that this coming Saturday, June 30th, there's going to be a huge rally here in D.C., and there's actually going to be all over the country. People who are disgusted by this, you can go to familiesbelongtogether.org, and you can find out where the nearest rally / protest is going to be taking place near you. Here in D.C., it is going to be in Lafayette Square, directly across the street from the White House. Of course, it's taking place on a Saturday, so it's likely that President Trump himself will be on the golf course, either at a Trump property in Virginia or at Mar-a-Lago in Florida.
Yes.
The one place I can tell you he will not be is in the Oval Office, reading briefing books and hearing people across the street
Never that.
calling him a motherfucker.
Never
He'll be on the golf course somewhere. That having been said, my hope is that we can get a similar turnout to this as what we had for the Parkland kids, the recent pro gun control protests, the women's march that took place in January right after
Right. That's
President
what
Trump
I was saying
inaugurated.
earlier. That's what I meant by you do this protest once, and you learn how to do it, and you have to continuously do it.
Yeah, and there were a couple of thousand people, mostly women, mostly mothers, who were in Senate offices today, and they did a sit-in at the Senate offices. I don't know if any were arrested or not, but they sat in, and it was thousands of them. They made their voices heard on this issue, and so I'm expecting a tenfold increase, at least, hopefully on Saturday. I plan on being there. It's going to be like 100 degrees in D.C., so I'm probably going to leave my kids at home, to be perfectly honest. But I do plan on being there. As you all know, I'm an immigration attorney. My overarching view on this is that it requires a level of dehumanization to treat people this way.
Right.
I see these people every day. I talk to them every day. I hear their stories. They're human to me. They're very, very human to me. And so I am disgusted that our government is doing this in our name. I do plan on being in Lafayette Square with my both middle fingers planted straight to the White House.
Well, I mean, it's absolutely necessary.
Whether the clown is in there or not, I don't give a fuck, but I'm going to be there.
Right.
And I hope there are a lot of people who come out, and I hope that there's a lot of people nationwide who come out. Familiesbelongtogether.org. Again, you can find the nearest rally, protest near you. They also will have all kinds of resources if you're wanting to volunteer, wanting to donate, wanting to contribute. So I highly recommend reaching out to them. And anything you want to add on this topic? Or should we move on to our cute Bronx Puerto Rican socialist?
I mean, let's move on to her because I can talk. I mean, because it's related. It's absolutely related.
It's definitely related. It's definitely related.
Like her being elected.
Abolish ICE is one of her planks.
Right. Okay. So this woman being elected. Or
we should talk about the woman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Right.
I made the mistake, and Mark is also.
Right.
We called her Ocasio-Castro.
Right.
Ocasio-Cortez.
Right. She
represents the Bronx and part of Queens. I mean, functionally now. She won the Democratic primary, and she is in all likelihood going to be elected.
So here's the fascinating thing about this to me. Gentrification in Brooklyn has shifted certain populations. Okay, so the OG hipster population from like 07, 08.
Yeah.
These people all have families now. This is honestly how it happened. Like I had to sit down and think about it, and I had to think, okay, so in 2007,
Brooklyn is like Adams Morgan.
Yeah, 2007, 2008, 2009. Those eras. Like I was doing a lot of work in those communities. That was like my first, freelancer paychecks.
Right.
Came from people in Brooklyn that wanted cool words about underground electro music. So all of those people,
they found the right guy.
How's a guy? So all of those people have families now.
Mm-hmm.
And because Williamsburg, Brooklyn is too expensive for them to live, they moved to the Bronx
Yep.
and to Queens. And that is where they live now with families. So
Yep.
they have like a block of people that are out there now. And once I put this together, I'm like, of course she was going to win. Like, this should be the least surprising thing in the world. Because these are people who were raised on the backs of minority culture as a cornerstone of the way that they created
Their power
their
structure.
own
Yeah.
their own lives and their own livelihoods. And for this woman to run, there's nothing about her that initially screams Latina. It just screams she's smart and she knows what she's doing and she wants to be an agent of change.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
I mean, she's definitely a POC.
Yeah, but I don't think that's necessarily like the biggest sell.
Yeah.
To me, it's the fact that she actually had a plan.
She did have a plan, but she also did say she was running. She just won she won the Democratic primary in the 14th district of New York, which is, as we mentioned, covers Bronx and a good portion of Queens.
Right.
And she was running against Joe Crowley, who is a white Irish guy who was basically like number 4 in Democratic leadership. I mean, a guy that had Pelosi said, I want to step down as minority leader, or if Democrats are winning,
God, his entire
he could have been
his entire
potentially
block,
Speaker of the House.
His entire block is in like Palm Springs or Westchester County now.
Good God.
Like, I'm just saying. No,
So-
honestly.
Well, let me ask you this, because we know what the demographics and the future demographics portend
Yeah.
for basically everybody in the 5 boroughs. It's the same as everybody in the 4 quadrants in
Right,
D.C.
of course.
The entire 5 boroughs are being gentrified. What happens? She's running for her 4th term
Right.
in 8 years from now is 2026.
Right.
What happens when all of a sudden she looks around and the Bronx isn't working class Puerto Ricans and Dominicans anymore? It's a lot of white people who, like you say, got gentrified out of Williamsburg.
Right. Well, in that case, they'll
And the
also-
Puerto Ricans are, where are they? In Westchester, more in
yeah,
Queens?
they'll be in
Where-
Westchester this time.
Where are they going to?
Okay, so in my mind, this again, this ties into this whole
Jersey?
gentrification conversation.
Yeah.
Well, of course they'll be in Jersey. It'll be in Hoboken. I can tell you that because I spent a lot of time in Hoboken, in Jersey City. That's where they'll end up. Like that's right. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's where the minorities end up
Mm-hmm.
because it's considerably less expensive to live there as opposed to like moving out to Westchester County or
Right. Or
you know,
Stamford.
just Stamford, right? Exactly. Like moving in Connecticut, going all the way into Connecticut. Jesus.
We're going deep on New York right here.
Yeah, so I mean, but this is important so that
Yeah.
people understand how demographics work and how population shifts work because that's how she won.
Mm-hmm.
Is because there was a shift in population where
Yep.
the incumbent was
Joe Crowley.
Joe Crowley, right? Crowley's core constituency literally is not there.
Yeah.
These people physically do not live in the homes they lived in less than 10 years ago.
Yep.
And here's the trouble of being an elected politician and being on Capitol Hill. Where is the one place that you don't end up as much as you need to end up there?
Back home.
Home. So the second you go home and you're trying to like, okay, let's go door to door and look at the... Mrs. Smith doesn't live here anymore. Mr. Santos
Mr. Khalil.
right. Khalil Rahman is next door to, like...
Santos Rodriguez.
Yeah, Santos Rodriguez. And it's like, okay, what do you guys need? Clearly, you don't need the same things.
They're like not a white guy.
right. They're like, well, what can I do for you?
But here's my question: do you think that district is going to re-whiten?
Yes, absolutely. Because it's the same thing that happened in D.C., where in 2009, 2010,
Right. They found every pocket in Northwest.
The initial gentrifiers were working class, recently educated whites
Mm-hmm.
who are a jump population because they're coming in and they're going to leave. They're going to stay in the same general geographic region, but their intent is to go somewhere eventually where they're supposed to go,
Yeah.
where they're supposed to end up. okay, so I'm going to live in this hovel on U Street and hang out and party with my hipster friends.
But I'm on U Street.
Right. But then when I get that real job, or I get my pay increase or my raise, or I decide to go to
married
graduate,
and I have a family.
right, or I decide to go to graduate school or whatever, I'm not going to live here anymore. I'm still staying in D.C.,
Right.
but I'm probably going to move like a little bit further, either
Northeast.
all the way further northeast to Brookland,
Yeah.
where there's a house for $350,000 that I can get into with a relatively inexpensive, down payment, or the rent's not going to be that bad, or and the people that are going to come in and move into that space are the people that read the New York Times article. New York Times, DC's best sales paper across the country is the New York Times. They write an article on every single, every single gentrifying community in the city.
They got a lot of people here. They got a lot of gentrifiers here.
Right.
in
So
the
they
city.
all come here because the Times writes the article. Shaw is wonderful.
Yeah.
Shaw is a land of unfettered opportunity.
The next great the next great undiscovered DC neighborhood.
They just did it to Petworth.
Petworth, yeah.
But like
Columbia
maybe
Heights.
9 months ago. Columbia Heights was a long time ago. But yeah, Petworth. Unfettered opportunity. Brand new renovated homes. Restaurants, coffee shops, diversity, Howard University. Whatever.
It's like Shaw, only farther out.
Right, exactly. But something to think about how this ties back into the conversation we were previously having.
I was going to say, and maybe this is a better conversation for next week when we can really dig into sort of all of the Ocasio-Cortez think pieces, since we got deep into gentrification, and that's great.
No, but that's the reason why she won. That's how she won.
That's the reason why she won. That also, I think, might be an Achilles heel going forward.
Right, because she only has one. She only has one term. Because by the time where she won, that now becomes the next hotbed for fucking pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, let's go to the place where the socialist is radically altering the future of America. Not this is actually happening.
I just want to point out the Bronx Puerto Rican socialist.
Right. Female.
Bronx Puerto Rican.
Yeah, exactly.
As the son of a proud New Yorican, not from the Bronx, but from Manhattan.
Right.
But as a son of a proud New Yorican, I got all love. I got all love for Puerto Ricans everywhere,
right?
Especially in New York.
Yeah, it's crazy. So like, all right, that's how she won. And the fact that she was a socialist is the cherry on top of the pie, because now you're thinking, okay, she's gonna level the playing field with some sort of universal basic income push.
She could. I mean, she could be the one who takes over the Bernie Sanders mantle. We keep talking about, when 2020 rolls around, is he going to run? Is he not going to run again? I mean, he's going to be close to 80 years old by the time here. I mean, I don't care what people say. Like, that's pretty fucking old. That's pretty fucking old.
I mean, Bernie's
we may not need, but I'm not suggesting that she's a viable presidential contender in 2020. By no means am I suggesting that.
So,
but she's going to win that seat. She's going to be in Congress.
Yeah.
There's probably going to be opportunities to move up the ladder in New York government.
I have to ask you a question. As a dyed-in-the-wool Democratic Party member, how do you feel about the oncoming rush of socialists into the Democratic Party?
I'm here for it. You've heard me say many, many, many times.
But
you've heard me say many, many, many times that the
moderates
dividing line
are screwed.
The dividing line in American politics is this: you have a right wing and a left wing,
right?
And you have establishment Republican Party, establishment Democratic Party, and the right wing and left wing always bitch about the establishment on their side with equal fervor. The difference is the right wing engineered a hostile takeover of the GOP.
No, they called the Russians to initiate.
They were doing it. They were doing it. They were
takeover.
doing it well before the Russians. They were doing it. The Russians helped them.
The Russians absolutely helped.
The Russians absolutely helped them, but they were doing it well before the Russians. I mean, the Tea Party was
machine.
The Tea Party was a machine. My argument has always been, and I think it's borne out by data, that the Tea Party was just basically the base of the Republican Party, the existing base of the Republican Party, just rebranded.
Right.
But the right wing has taken over the GOP. The left wing still shits on the Democratic Party.
Right.
They won't vote Democrat. So I am here for all of the left wing, all of the Bernieism, all of the Sandersism. If you can package it into an attractive Bronx Puerto Rican, all the better.
Well, I mean, that's the whole
the
thing.
better.
I mean,
like I am here for it. And when you say died, I feel like I need to clarify. It died in the wool Democrat. Does that mean that have always been like rah Democrat?
No.
Like the Democrats have been a poorly run, shitty party pretty much my whole life. Like Bill Clinton was a political superhero. Barack Obama was a political superhero.
Every other Democrat.
And every other fucking Democrat in my whole life, whether it was Daschle and Gephardt or Gary Hart,
I always go
John
back to like,
Edwards or John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, they're all shitheads. And so when died in the wool Democrat, like, yeah, I vote Democrat all the time.
Right, I was going to say, that's why I called you that.
Because the Republicans are crazy. Because
Right.
the right wing has engineered that takeover of the GOP. I can't vote GOP. Even if there is a sane Republican running, I can't vote for it because of the baggage that he brings.
That's not happening.
It's not happening.
Literally not happening.
It's not
for
happening.
another generation. So so I'm a socialist.
That's what I hear. That's
things
what I hear.
that are things that I tell people all the time, and they think that I'm a democratic socialist, but I'm not. Because the thing, so the kind of socialism
You're a social socialist,
right? The one, that the kind of socialism that is being advocated for is democratic socialism, which is this kind of like we are going to have conversations and break down policy into bite-sized formats that can be appealing to both sides of the aisle, and we can have conversations about universal basic income. We can have conversations about socialized health care. Basically it's like Bernie, but with like a bigger smile. Like you put like a stamp a smile on Bernie Sanders' face. That's what it is.
The right wing's not interested in that conversation.
No, but that's but the whole point of this kind of socialism is to go look at a right winger in the face and go, you really want this. And there's some kind of like magical mind fuck that takes place.
This would be good for you.
Right. So that's one style of socialism. I'm a free market socialist, which means that I'm an advocate for globalizing a marketplace and creating a baseline.
You're a China-style socialist.
Yes.
Yes.
You create a baseline notion of what the middle is.
China socialist, not North Korean socialist.
Right. So the whole gambit is based around the middle.
Mm-hmm.
There's no upper, there's no lower. We're not looking at either one of those things. The whole gambit is based on how do we get here?
Yeah.
And if it's the most savage way that we need to get there, that's what we're doing.
Right.
If it's the least savage way that we need to get there, that's what we're doing. It's a very cold, didactic, like concept-driven, book-smart,
data-driven,
extraordinarily data-driven
socialism.
This is why I obsess over data, like the way that I do. This is why I will happily do the math. If you read my stuff, I will happily do the math to prove a point.
And you should read his stuff. It's Marcus with a C.
ULING on Medium. There you go. So
You should read his stuff.
So, but that's the thing, and to me, that's the answer, and that's the kind of socialism where if you approach Donald Trump and his cronies, they're cronies now.
Yeah.
They're colluding cronies. That's what they are, colluding cronies.
That's what you call people in a crime syndicate.
Right. So
which is what we have.
Right. So these are
the White House.
These are the kinds of socialists who they could walk into a room with Donald Trump and say, "Here's what we want. The poor need to make $15 an hour." Why? Well, here is this data that shows you that if we take this piece from you and this piece from them and we put it right here and we don't move it anywhere else in the circle, we put it right there, it works.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be, and there's a level that the Chinese have.
Well, the reaction you would get from Trump to that pitch is he would be like, "That's a great idea. I love it. We should absolutely fucking do it. And then you would leave the Oval Office. The Chamber of Commerce would come in
Right.
and be like, look, we go to $15 an hour. These businesses are going to go down. And then the next thing you know, Trump is on TV. You're in the hotel room.
Right.
You just had a meeting with him an hour and a half ago. And you turn on CNN and Trump's like, yeah, we can't do $15
Right.
an hour.
But
Are
as
you
a-
crazy?
but
You know
if
what will happen
right.
to business?
But as a free market socialist, I'll tell you that we're already going to a place where we're going to have singularity in the marketplace. Anybody who watches any of these crazy, like, again, going back to Netflix, which I watch all the time, going to watch Glow at 3 o'clock this morning.
That's right.
It comes out on Netflix.
Season 2?
Yeah,
I
season
still
2.
haven't seen season 1.
it's great.
Oh, my God, I know.
It's great. So in any event, there's a lot of stuff about the singularity that's ended up in the back end of Netflix. You should watch any of these things.
All right.
Just because it gives you a sense of where we're headed in American...
Text me a list. 'Cause
I could do
definitely
that.
am
Yeah.
interested. Absolutely.
So we're headed to a space where... And it's already happening because we have all of these... we're having all of these, like, partnerships that are developing suddenly. We're having, like, Fox and Disney or Fox and Comcast are
Yes.
vying
That's
for
called
Disney.
corporate consolidation.
Right.
Which is another issue.
Right, but we're getting to a point where there's going to be a singularity. Like, there's going to be, like, one giant conglomerate that handles movies. One giant conglomerate that handles fast food. One giant conglomerate that does all of these things.
Yeah.
Which is what...
Economies of scale.
Right, economies of scale, and for me as a socialist, that's what I believe in. So when I talk about, like, a third party that emerges out of all this, because I think this is the easiest way to, like, get out of this into, like, closing out the show, is there's a third party that's developing, or a third notion of what a party could be that's developing. And if there's anything that Cortez got it right.
Yeah.
Her election signifies, it's the fact that we are open to the idea in a significant way
We definitely are.
that there is a third way to do this.
Yeah.
Now, developing what that third way is going to look like in a way that's sustainable, that's the next conversation. And that's the one I'm truly intrigued by. Because it's not her. It's absolutely not her, because she's in the wrong place at the wrong time. She's in New York City, trying to advocate for universal basic income for 8 million people. 8.4 million people. Probably not going to happen.
Yeah. The universal basic income that you need to afford rent anywhere in the 5 boroughs.
Right. That's not going to happen.
It's a pretty high universal basic
But
income.
it does open a conversation, and that is important.
I think that we should absolutely continue this conversation. I think she's I guess I would disagree slightly. I think she's a fascinating character in her own right. But I do agree with you that the ideas that she's bringing forth are ideas that actually I think have a lot of public support.
Right.
So, but we're going to kind of move on to our last segment of the night. We decided we've kind of bitched and moaned about a lot of shit going on in our country right now. So we wanted to end on what I think is going to be a positive note. We want to talk a little bit about the new Kamasi Washington album.
Oh, God, yes.
Heaven and Earth. For people who don't know, Kamasi Washington, a jazz saxophone player from Los Angeles. He is, I just don't know any other way to say it. He's a genius. He's what I would call like whatever the musical equivalent of a 5-tool player in baseball is. That's what Kamasi is, because he's genius on the horn. Like it's always hackneyed to compare a saxophone player to Coltrane, but like his tone, his groundedness in the blues really does remind me of Coltrane. He's also a brilliant composer, an arranger. The musical palette that he has on this album. This is a double album of mostly instrumental jazz, and he has one of the best jazz bands out there. All these great LA
West Coast
cats,
Get Down,
the West Coast Get Down, who are amazing musicians, tremendous musicians. And then he's got like a 39-piece orchestra, like a 15-person choir for these vocal parts. He's composing all these harmonies and melodies, the horn harmonies, the string harmonies. Just it's genius music. It's very kind of I see it as sort of Afrofuturism in many ways. It's he basically has told people in press that it's intended to be kind of a meditation on where we are as a society, as a culture, and trying to uplift that, trying to really uplift that, and I think he succeeds wildly. I mean, I think his first album, The Epic, was a double album. Then he had Harmony of Difference that came out late last year, which is more like an EP, which is just a genius album. Just the entire concept of simple songs with very simple thematic elements that then build in the last song to contain all of the melodic, thematic, and harmonic elements from those prior songs in that last song. It's just it's genius musicality. And then this album, Heaven and Earth, another double album, and it's very, very dense and very deep. And I gave my thoughts on Chunky Glasses. We've heard Marcus Moore expound.
Of course
I haven't heard the official.
No, because I haven't
Marcus,
said anything.
Marcus with a C.K. Dowling take.
All right,
So I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
All
Heaven,
right,
Heaven and Earth, Kamasi Washington.
Okay,
I give it a thumbs up. Go buy it.
It's phenomenal. A lot of thoughts about this record. I'll start by talking about Run Run Shaw. Run Run Shaw is the person who's responsible for every single great Shaw Brothers Hong Kong produced kung fu movie. Yeah. He a little known fact about him is that the guy who is the composer of Fist of Fury, the theme for
I can't get that song out of my head.
So the opening song on the first the Heaven album of the double album for Kamasi is called Fist of Fury. The movie is called Fist of Fury. So there's an interplay. There's a cool little play on words there. That's Fists of Fury. If you're an African American person in 2018, the idea of Fists of Fury, fighting against the man, because there's a huge blaxploitation undercurrent to this album.
The lyrics on that song are tremendous. I mean, they talk about, I use my hands to help my fellow man.
Right.
But if I'm met with, unjust injury, then I change my hands to Fists of Fury.
Right.
There's also a spoken word part in the middle where they talk about, our time as victims is over. We do not seek justice.
Right.
We're seeking retribution.
Exactly.
It's very, very deep. Very deep.
So when Joseph Koo, he went to Berklee School of Music.
Right.
Graduated in Boston in the early 1950s. So he's a student of cool jazz. So much of that era of early 70s, like blaxploitation style jazz, Hong Kong, karate movie style
funky
jazz
stuff
is super funky, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't get funkier until later.
Mm-hmm.
This initial stuff is very much still cool jazz.
Yeah.
It's all just like globalized takes on Coltrane, on
Bossa
Nova, like just cool, simple 50s like jazz. Brubeck is in there, like a lot of those names.
Yeah.
Early Miles, not Kind of Blue Miles, not Bitches Brew Miles, but like
Birth of the Cool.
Right, just
Miles.
Birth of the Cool. Just cool Miles, it's Cool Miles Davis. So that's the first half of this album.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful early 70s. It's an homage.
Right.
Because
very grounded in the idioms.
Right. So much of what makes, and I'm basically selling everybody watching this on this album, by the way, if you haven't just immediately started listening.
Thumbs up.
I'm selling you on it. I'm explaining why it's important. Because it's, to Kevin's point, it is one of the best made albums of the last 25 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they gave a jazz artist 3 hours to make music.
And an infinite musical palette.
Right.
And literally infinite musical palette.
So so the first album,
the instrumentation on there is just crazy.
Is this beautiful, cool jazz homage to like early 70s, not even funky. It like airs on the edge of funk.
Yeah.
Because
it's soul.
We'll get to the funk. But it's soul. It's like that beautiful soul thing that exists in like the era of Stax meets like
almost like Papa was a Rolling Stone.
Like that.
It's just soul is just starting to get funky.
Right, you're starting to get funky, but you're on the edge, so it rides that edge really comfortably.
Right.
And to me, as a band, the West Coast Get Down excel at doing that thing.
Yeah.
Exceedingly, like they could make that same album 100 times for the rest of their lives and be billionaires because it's just that good. It's like unconscious. They make this music that just feels unconscious. It's like, oh, okay, because you know where it's going.
Let's do it as a bossa nova now.
Right.
Let's do it.
So I wanted to ask you this because there's points on that first album where you feel like you know where this is going. Not because it's like Fist of Fury where like you know, like you've heard it.
Right.
But there are moments where even in like the solos that occur, even when like, you know, there's like two drummers doing like a call and response.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh, I know how they're gonna play their drums. I know like what hits they're gonna use. I know like what kind of sound and style where they're going for.
Right.
You get to the second album.
Yeah.
You get to Earth.
Heaven, actually. I think you got to have
Heaven,
yeah.
yeah.
I think you have it back.
Yeah, so you get to Heaven.
First song on there, The Space Traveler's Lullaby.
It's incredible.
Amazing.
Okay. So I'll
no
say,
beat.
So I'll say this. Kamasi Washington, though he does not rap, might be one of the 5 best rappers in rap right now.
Okay. Go on.
Okay.
Mr. Dowling.
There is a way that he plays his saxophone. Part of this is the fact that he's had to play a bunch of festivals.
Yeah.
And if you go to concerts in Washington, D.C., it's the same thing when you go to a festival, except louder. People talk. They listen. They look down. They're doing everything but, like, paying attention to the music.
Right.
So any musician will tell you that if you're in a venue like that that's wide open and all air, you have to play louder. If you play louder on a woodwind instrument, there's a chance that you're going to distort notes and it's not going to be as crisp. But if you learn the art of breath control and the art of like amplification without distortion, then what the instrument turns into is a voice.
That's correct.
And that is what Kamasi has. And he knows that he has this. And that's the genius of this album, that he knows that he has a voice.
Yeah.
And so every other voice then becomes the chorus.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. And then in the mixing of the record, when you have a 39-piece orchestra that's playing behind a saxophone, this has never happened. This hasn't happened in, I'd say,
Not in jazz.
Years?
Not in jazz, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very orchestral. It kind of reminded me a lot of modern Duke
But I would
Ellington.
say it's like 40 or 50 years since we've had somebody in jazz who plays that style of instrument be the leader of that size and that level of talent of a band.
Yeah.
Which is astounding. Sure. And the fact that he plays the saxophone as if he is using it like his voice.
Yeah.
And then when basically the second half of the record takes on James Brown, takes on Herbie Hancock, takes on Stevie Wonder, all of these artists whose breaks informed hip-hop culture. So if the music sounds familiar, it's because DJ Premier isn't chopping these up into small, tiny little bits and, throwing Guru's voice over top of them. Like, that's not what's happening here.
Right.
Like, everything's allowed to breathe.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful because if you're a fan of rap music and you're looking for like the next progression of where this goes, because I feel like, okay, rap is 50 years old. Like everybody in the room, rap is 50. Polo, hey, Mike, rap is 50 years old. That's crazy, right? Yeah. Rap is 50. So you have to evolve the culture at some point. And trap is one evolution. The electro rap thing is another evolution. This thing over here is the actual pure evolution. That's the crazy part of it to me.
Yeah.
It's like this is the pure evolution of hip-hop culture into the next iteration of where music is headed. Because it's free hip-hop. It's not even just free jazz.
Yeah.
But it's free hip-hop without producers involved.
As someone who's in a jazz hip-hop band, I certainly hope that is where.
Right. But imagine if you had to play notes that weren't cut into eighths and halves and sixteenths when you were putting together songs, because you're thinking, okay, we're a rap band, so we have to play rap notes. But imagine if you could play every single rap note you wanted to play, you could play a jazz note instead. And you could let the thing breathe.
Yeah.
And as a guitarist, you're able to like let like a break. Cause okay, so the thing that got me is that he's able to do things on bars with the instrument like a voice. That's crazy because he can reach ranges that the voice can't reach.
For sure.
So the songs say more.
Yeah.
Which is, it just blows my mind. It's heady as hell.
Yeah, to me, the genius of the album is just the way that the songs are constructed. Like I say, he uses an enormous musical palette, and he really uses it to great effect from a production standpoint, from a composition, from an arrangement standpoint. It's beautiful music.
God, I want to
very meditative. It's something that you can listen to
as
in
a
the
composer,
car.
as a composer and a conductor.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing stuff. It's amazing stuff.
Astounding.
All right, well, that looks like it's going to wrap it up for us this week.
Yes.
DCTBD, thanks to our crew, Nick and Mike in the back. Thanks to Molly and One Love Massive, everybody here. Thanks to everybody in DC. We love you. Thank you so much. Good night.
Yo, that was beautiful. So did that review work?